Alright guys, welcome to this page of the notes. Now what we're going to do here in this page of the notes is we're going to get some practice where I have given you the graph of a function and I want you to now write me the equation, right? You're going to write me the equation. So here we go, let's just jump right into it. The very first one. Well, I should immediately recognize it thanks to its nice U shape, what we call a parabola, that this guy is quadratic. Let me write you the general equation for the quadratic. You should have memorized this a couple of pages ago in the notes. It is this. It is y equals plus or minus plus, hang on, plus or minus a x plus or minus h squared plus or minus k. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my graph, figure out what my a, my h, and my k are, and then write my equation, right? Plug those numbers in, and you have your graph. One quick thing about these problems. When I give you a graph, A will always be 1. All right, I will never give you a vertical stretch or compression because it'll be very, very difficult for you to figure out what the value of A is, at least here in Chapter 2. We'll worry about it later, but for now, A will always be 1. All you need to do is figure out whether it's positive or negative. And in this case, since my parabola is opening up, I know that A is a positive 1. What about H? Do I have a horizontal shift? Well, since my vertex is at x equals 0, I don't. There is no horizontal shift. H is 0. What about a vertical shift? Well, my vertex is at y equals a positive 1. That means I've shifted the whole thing up 1 unit. That means that k is equal to a positive 1. Plug all that stuff into our general equation and get me my answer. So I have y equals a is 1. I don't need to write it. It is implied. So then I'm going to have an x. Now, x plus 0 is just an x. So I don't have to write anything. It's just going to be an x squared. And then I do have a k of 1. So I'll have a plus 1 tacked on to the end. And there we go. I have now written the equation for this graph. A is 1. H is 0. K is 1. And you would get that guy. Let's try this next one here, parabola. Obviously, right, this parabola is much, much wider. Don't worry about that. A, for the ones I give you on tests or quizzes, right now is always going to be a 1. So let's go ahead and write an equation for this guy. Once again, figuring out A, H, and K. Well, the parabola is opening up, so K is going to be a positive 1. H. Do I have a horizontal shift? I don't. The vertex is at x equals 0, so there's no horizontal shift. What about k? Is there a vertical shift? Well, again, the vertex of the parabola is at 0. There is no vertical shift, and so when I write my equation, y equals x squared. For you guys, this is just going to be the standard parent function. Again, I know it is much wider. Actually, we would have later on, we'll talk about dilations and how you figure out what A is. It's actually pretty simple. What you would do is choose a point. You would plug that point in for X and Y and then solve for A. A would be your unknown and that would allow you to figure out what A is. But at this point, we don't need to worry about that. We'll do that later. So for right now, for you guys, A will always just be 1 and you get Y equals X squared. Let's try another one. I got this one right here. This is going to be our identity function. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Let me erase this stuff. Erase, erase, erase. Okay, remember the general for the identity function is y equals plus or minus a times x plus or minus h plus or minus k. All right, let's go through and see if we can figure out what's going here. First, I do recognize that there is absolutely a vertical shift. Let me start there. A is always going to be 1 for you guys, so we're just going to do a 1. And since the slope of the line is positive, it will be a positive 1, right? The only reason that that would be a negative 1 is if your identity function, right, had a negative slope to it, then it'd be a negative 1. But it doesn't. I have a positive slope, so it's a positive 1. Now let's see if we can figure out our shift. Well, my equation would normally go through the origin, but it looks like it's been shifted down 1, 2, 3, 4. It's been shifted down 5 units. Let's go ahead and call that k, negative 5. And we're going to plug all of that stuff in. So y is equal to x minus 5. Now I've got the equation for this line, right? This tells me that my slope is 1, my y-intercept is a negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have my y-intercept. Since the slope is 1, that's up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, right? I would get that line. Here we go. Let's try this absolute value one. Write out the general equation for absolute value so that once I find my a, h, and k, I can get those guys plugged in. Well, I remember the general equation is y equals plus or minus a times the absolute value of x plus or minus h plus or minus k. Here we go. Let's figure out a. Well, a is always going to be 1. Does my v open up? It does, so it has to be a positive 1. What about h? Do I have a horizontal shift? Well, the v for the parent function goes through the origin. I don't go through the origin. I've actually been shifted over 1, 2, 3 units, careful, 3 units in the negative direction. Remember, h is always the opposite, so h is going to be a positive 3. Do I have a k? Well, since the v is at y equals 0, it's not been shifted up or down. That means that k is 0, and I have y equals the absolute value of x plus 3. This would be the equation for this graph right here. A horizontal shift 3 units to the left. Since I already have the absolute value up here, let's go ahead and try this one now, since the absolute value is already there. Oh, I just erased it. Hang on. Let me write it again. Can't believe I did that. I wanted to do this one because I already had the equation written, and then I go ahead and erase it. Get an eraser happy. Let's write it again. It doesn't hurt to practice. Y equals plus or minus a times the absolute value of x plus or minus h plus or minus k. All right, here we go. A is always going to be a 1. You just need to figure out, is it positive or negative? Well, since my v is opening up, it must be a positive 1. Do I have a horizontal shift? Well, I take a look at this, and my vertex is at x, right? My x value is 0 at 0. X equals 0 is my vertex. There is no horizontal shift. It has not been shifted left or right, so h is 0. What about a vertical shift? Well, definitely, my vertex for the absolute value would have been at 0, 0, but now it's all the way down here at negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, at negative 4. So I've shifted down 4 units. Let's go ahead and write our equation. Y is equal to the absolute value of x minus 4. And that would be the equation for this guy, a vertical shift of 4 units. Guys, that gives you all sorts of practice in this section with these things. 4 common types of graph in Algebra 2. The constant function, the identity function, the absolute value function, the quadratic function. You should know what all of them look like, and the equation for the parent function, because you need to be able to identify them. I will give you a graph and ask you which of those functions has been graphed. Then you need to be very, very comfortable with transformations, figuring out a, h, and k, and what each of those will do to your graph, so that if I give you an equation, you can identify the a, the h, and the k in that equation and then graph the function using those transformations. And then finally, you need to be able to look at a graph, figure out, has it been shifted left or right? Has it been shifted up or down? Has it been flipped across the axis? Identify your a, h, and k from the graph, and then plug those into the general equations for each of the parent functions in order to write the function that has been graphed. Ton of stuff here in section 7. Please watch this video as many times as you need to get comfortable with it. or come see me and ask me questions in class. Thanks for joining me for this section, guys. I'll see you next time.